Dr. Dominguez,
I'm ready.
you ready? Call the meeting to order. Mr. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
John, can you hear us okay? Is it John? Oh, it could be Cammie. I didn't know if she was.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And we will start with approval of the agenda.
Madam President, I move we approve as presented with the following amendments. Number one, additional certified and classified personnel actions for consideration. Item number E-3 and 2, remove the elementary student handbook from item number E-4B.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passed. We will, is there any public comments? Then any correspondence? And we will move on to the consent agenda.
Madam President, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passed. We will move on to the curriculum report about summer school. Hello.
Just put a name to a face. I'm Heather Stegman. I am your coordinator of curriculum and instruction. I replaced Brittany Shields starting July 1st. I'm here to talk to you about summer school tonight. We had 333 students who participated in our math instruction this summer. And we had 345 students who participated in our literacy programs. Those students were selected from our after-school engage programs. At the beginning of summer learning, students were given a pre-test of their basic skills. And at the end of the program, they were given the same test in order to measure their growth during their 2 weeks of summer learning. This graph summarizes the results of that data. This data does not include students who only completed one of those tests. So if kids happen to miss the day that we did the pre or post test, their data is not included in here. You can see that we had pretty significant growth during our summer learning program. A few highlights are that our 5th graders went from 15% pre-test average to 71% on the post-test, with 95% of those students showing growth. Our 6th graders improved from 43% on the pre-test to 74% on the post-test, with 100% of the students showing improvement. Overall, the pre-test average improved from 29% to 60% with 2 weeks of instruction, and 81% of our students overall showed growth. Our math, this graph shows the improvement of our students from pre-test to post-test in math. Again, we can see some good growth in our summer learning program. A few highlights are our 2nd graders went from a 36% on the pre-test to a 72%, with 89% of those students showing growth. Our 4th graders improved from 47% pre-test to 70% post-test, with 88% of the students showing improvement. And overall, the pre-test average improved from 37% to 57% in just 2 weeks, with 77% of our overall students showing growth. The next slide just summarizes what percent from each grade actually showed improvement during that 2-week period. First graph is for our ELA. Our lowest point was 67%, but we got as high as 100% of some of the grades showing some growth. So for math, Again, 63% was our lower point. We went as high as 95% of our students in the 6th grade showing improvement. Our goals in our summer school program this year were actually twofold. First, we wanted to see academic improvement in our targeted group of students, which we just looked at. Secondly, this was a hands-on opportunity for teachers to improve their instructional techniques through the good to great model. So equally important to our student improvement is our teacher improvement data. We had 33 teachers participate in math instruction and 36 teachers participate in literacy. The teachers participated in 1 week of professional development from May 31st to June 3rd. And they taught summer school from June 6th to June 17th using the good to great instructional model. Priority was given to teachers who had not been trained in the good to great model yet, or if they went through it a second time, but they were choosing to go through it with the other subject area this time. Teacher growth was measured through a self-reporting survey. For the teachers who participated in the good to great ELA model, 90% of the teachers agreed or strongly agreed that their teaching had improved during the summer learning. And 98% of those teachers reported they will continue to use the strategies that they learned in the future. For math, 85% of the teachers either agreed or strongly agreed that their teaching had improved. And 92% of the teachers reported they will continue to use the strategies that they learned this summer, which is really what we're looking for, is improved strategies that we're going to see carry through the school year. Our ongoing goal will be to build on that foundation by asking teachers to implement those strategies at least 1 time per week throughout the school year. So, do you have any questions that I could answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you say 33 teachers participated in this, do you mean certified teachers? Do you mean paras? Who?
Certified teachers. We did have paraprofessionals that supported. I do not have numbers on that. Do you happen to know?
There's right around 50 paras that supported the classrooms throughout the special ed and good to great summer school.
And then I have, yeah. So I just noticed that on both of these, on both of the data in both areas, 1st grade is the lowest on both. Is there a reason for that? Is there any?
Not having been an actual participant, I don't know. It would be hard to say. I could ask some of the teachers that taught at that grade level, but you're talking very foundational level kids who, we would, if they started behind, which our Engage program is our after school program for kids that have some struggles. So it would not be surprising for them to start farther behind.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering, if 1st grade isn't one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Dr. Dominguez, did you have any comments on summer school?
No, the TNTP model, the good great model is going to benefit us, and any system will work, but the same thing, the strategies, being engaged and moving those strategies forward, and then 50 paras being there also benefits us greatly. I mean, it does. And you're right, 33 teachers certified, but then 50, that's 88 individual adults in there that are getting the strategies. That moves us all forward, and it is about engagement for our students. So that's what we're wanting.
This total of adding the 70 teachers this summer, I think we didn't have exact calculations, because when you look at how many certified staff we have versus long-term subs, it waves a little bit, but we should have anywhere between 65 and 70% of our certified staff have now gone through a good to great, which is that condensed PD version of looking at different strategies. So one of our goals was to get to around 75% by this year, but it was a little bit more difficult when we've got a lot of long-term subs and they weren't necessarily able to commit to some of these as well. So we still feel like we've got a strong foundation that has gone through the good to great piece. So we have new teacher training coming up in August. We have 2 coaches that were actually hired by TNTP to work this summer, Julia Morales and Mary Jane White, to also provide good to great trainings in other parts of the country to help out as facilitators. They're going to be taking the new staff in August through a mini version of the Good to Great. So we'll keep everybody, all the new staff coming in, will get some of that same information as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
They will move on to unfinished business. I don't have who's speaking. The controversial issues policy. Is that you?
That's me, whatever questions you have, I
Okay.
guess, so, yeah.
Did you get any feedback from the public? Because these were both in our agenda and the updates and all that stuff. So we had an opportunity.
Yes, no, I haven't. Dr. Dominguez, have you heard anything, any comments?
Not a word, not a peep, so we're just assuming the board looking at it, and then the same thing, this did go through Ms. Cunningham, our legal attorney, and then who else, if anybody? Well,
KSB attorneys and then Jennifer.
our attorney. Right. I think it's just meant to, if there is controversial issues that we address it, but then also we're a school, so therefore teacher is supposed to be subject matter, not necessarily their political views. And I mean, it's 2/17/92 is when it was adopted. So the truth of it is that's 30 years ago when it was adopted. So we're just looking at it and, you know, and not saying there is going to be or not going to be, but just the teachers there to content more than their political views. That's the truth.
Glenda, can you hear me?
I can.
Glenda, this is John. I had emailed Dr. Dominguez about this. Just the new policy to me seemed pretty broad. And I was thinking through that a little bit, and that's why I wanted to talk about it just a little bit about possibly bringing back some of the stuff in our old policy where we specifically laid out certain things that like teaching unbiased and stuff like that. And then also some of the new, I would say some of the new things that are popping up in schools that can be a distraction from school, like gender identity and stuff like that. We put some language in there that we don't need to talk about that. We're in the business of teaching. We don't need to touch on any of those social issues. It's kind of what I'd talked to Dr. Dominguez about a little bit.
Okay. Thoughts on that from the board?
I remember seeing the sentence on the old one about bias, and I thought that was funny to have bias in there because everybody has bias. So I think it's when you get to a point where you're specifically teaching one side of an issue. So I don't really like using the word bias because everybody is inherently biased. And so I think to hold people to an unrealistic standard wouldn't be in the best interest.
I think what the policy does stipulate is it's important to show all sides of an issue that come up in a classroom. And, we can bring back other wording and I can send it back to the attorney. I think one of the things that hit me as I worked through this with the attorneys is there are so many things now that can be controversial. If we make a list and tell the teachers, this is your list, and then something else comes up that wasn't on the list, then that wasn't controversial. And so can they teach one way or another? If we leave it broader, then as it comes up and it's controversial, then they know that they need to teach all sides, no matter what the subject is.
Yeah. And to a
So,
certain extent, even controversial is relative.
right.
I mean, what's controversial to
But if you get two students disagreeing on a subject, then let's look at all sides of it.
exactly.
It gives you a way to proceed in your class,
Yeah.
so.
I would agree with that.
But we can look at other wording if that's what you choose.
And I'm not exactly sure how the rest of the board is feeling. Because I hate to keep putting it off, but I want to make sure we get this right because there seems to be a lot of interpretations. I'm not sure how we can have more discussion on it, but I'd like to have more of the board here if we're going to pass it.
Do you want to hold for another meeting?
Yeah, that's my opinion, but if there's a motion made and a second, if the rest of the board wants to go ahead and vote on this, that's up to you guys. I'm just one.
We
So,
have quorum, and if you guys have issues, then for sure, but if it's just one board member that has an issue with it, I hate to not pass it. We're not always all gonna agree, it's the majority. So if the majority of us feel like we need to have more discussion, then let's have more discussion. But if the majority of us feel like as presented works, and like anything else, this is not set in stone. This is something that we can go through here and see if we have any things that come up that might let us know, hey, this was not specific enough. We can do that as well. But again, if, yeah.
You don't even have to wait a year. I mean,
Right.
if at Christmas
True.
time you're saying, oh,
Yeah.
wow, we didn't foresee that at the election or whatever, then we can bring it back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I feel like that, I kind of went back and did some research, and I kind of feel like the eyes that have read it and that have gave their input, we've asked for input. You know, I think it's time to move forward on it, and like you said, if someone disagrees, then sure, you know, but you know, you're never, it's a fluid document, really it is, because we're never all gonna agree, and the topics can always change, and the good thing is it can be changed if we don't feel like that it's right or it needs adjusted, we can do that at any time, so.
Of the 5 that are here tonight, Jackie, if you're not comfortable and you're not, I mean, then three then is more than 2. So I'm happy to do it. I just hate if we have 4 people that, or even 3 people that are on board and feel like it will work, then I think we should move forward. I just do this because we're also the school year starting. We're gonna get, I feel like, you know, we always have a lot of things on our plate. So, Jackie, do you have a?
I'm okay with it. I mean, because we can always go back. And it's something, there may be, who knows what comes up that could be controversial 6 months down the road, that's not today. So,
Is that okay, Jennifer? How we move
Yeah.
forward at this time?
I'm still not sure I'm comfortable with voting for it, but I didn't. I didn't submit any, sorry, it was Untitled. I'm looking at the agenda on here because my iPad's done. But I didn't request any changes either, so.
Well, we need 4 to get the thing passed. So if we don't get 4, then it will not pass.
I'll bring it back next time.
So if you
However,
don't
with
build
the
them.
board's permission, I will continue to bring new policies each board meeting until we kind of catch up with some of our
Yeah.
updates.
Yeah.
yes.
And we have a whole lot of policies because there's several that are so outdated.
Yes, we do.
So that's my concern
Right.
too, is that if we continue to get too in the weeds with making things more specific, then we might really take a very long time for every single policy.
I don't know.
The only thing I could see that might be beneficial is if a teacher is unsure if something should be discussed in the classroom, just adding to who to ask for further guidance.
And I believe we discussed this the last meeting, but it's still, I'm still questioning, okay, if the controversial subject arises, how, that's general to me, is it in context with curriculum? Is it because a teacher decides to discuss it, or is it comes up in student discussion?
It can be all of those, Jennifer, in my mind, because especially when we talk about a year with an election, for an example.
Right.
Those are current issues that are going to come up in the classroom. So, and when I think about making a list or adding some things to that, look at some of the things that have transpired just this last year with the Supreme Court that wasn't even in anybody's radar for being at that level a year ago. So do we leave those off, or do we add them, or how do we hit everything that could potentially be an issue? And it can be stemmed from a direct link to their curriculum as well. It could be something that somebody takes, down that other direction. So I think all of those that you bring up are absolutely possibles.
And this is for all grade levels
Yes,
also.
ma'am.
Well, I just know that there's a lot in the buzz among politics and that kind of stuff, but especially with the gender identity stuff. Sometimes some religious stuff comes up too, and that may be controversial, but since we're not listing those. There's different subjects that are appropriate at certain grade levels that may be controversial. So where does that come into this policy? That's because they're not listed. That's where I'm not sure.
And John, is that what I'm understanding from you? You're thinking that there are some subjects that should be off limits altogether.
I am thinking that there should be some of these subjects that definitely aren't grade appropriate, Glenda.
Okay.
When you talk about, sexual identity and how kids identify, and it doesn't matter to me how kids identify one bit, but I just don't think that's anything that needs to be talked about in the grade school level kids at all. We need to be talking about math, science, reading, the things that we're trying to teach the kids and what the taxpayers are paying for. I just don't. I think some of those can be specifically listed as off limits, and then there's other ones that are very broad that can and should be talked about that are controversial, because I think you learn from some of those. But there's some of them to me that are they're not appropriate in school. That's where I'm at, Glenda.
So I'm going to give you a situation then, John, and tell me if you want that to be handled by the teacher, or the teacher says you have to go back and talk to your parent or whatever on that. Because I know for a fact, because the principal called me, we had a situation at an elementary school this last year that a student was concerned about gender identity, and they wanted to talk to their teacher about it. And this was not an open classroom discussion, but was asking for resources. So is that something then, because the student is in 4th or 5th grade, that the teacher says, I can't talk to you about it? Or do they, and maybe the student wasn't comfortable going home and discussing it?
Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is exactly, Glenda. I think if it's, the way I read this policy, it was more across the classroom is what the way the first sentence reads. And I just don't think that those topics should be addressed in a classroom. If a teacher's talking to a student one-on-one, that may be different, but the way this policy reads is it's in the classroom.
So instructional topics versus maybe counseling.
Well, and I know you asked John that question, but
Yeah.
that was my first comment is, I don't even feel like it's a teacher's place to counsel on that. That needs to go to the counselor.
Right. Yeah.
So even offering resources,
That resource could be to go to the counselor, so.
in my opinion, that's what it needs to be. But I'm not the administrator or we set the policies, I agree,
But another thing sorry.
no, it's okay. I just think that's one of those specifics that maybe our teachers are trained in that kind of information. I don't know, but that's really not subject matter that we have in current curriculum, that they're educated and teaching on those specific subjects. So I really think that would, in that situation, I would hope that they would, if they feel like, yeah, they should talk to their parents, but if they're not willing to do that, the counselor's the next step, not the teacher finding them resources.
I think we have to be really careful too, because for example, there's several things that are going to come up with the Supreme Court. They're already being discussed that might, happen during this coming school year, and sexuality, same-sex marriage, which might include gender identity, might be issues that come up because it may come up in the Supreme Court. And I think also like teachers, if you have a kindergarten or first grade teacher, I think that they are trained and know that what is appropriate for their students. And I think when we start to get really detailed, we're also sending a message that we don't trust that our teachers know what is appropriate, what is age appropriate. And I get like that sometimes in the media, you might hear of something happening, but for the most part, I want to say that teachers are trained. They go to school, they have higher level degrees, and they are taught the things that are age appropriate for students. And so when we continually try to dictate to students or to teachers exactly what you can approach, exactly what you can teach in the classroom, we're really giving them the message that we don't think that they have those skills. And I don't want to give that message. When I send my child to the school, yes, their teacher might make mistakes. Yes, their teacher is going to teach with biases. And that's my job as a parent when they come home, because let's be honest, our kids really learn the most when they get fired up. That's when my kids, I can ask them every day, what'd you learn at school? Nothing. It's those things that strike a chord with them that they'll say, well, guess what my teacher said today? And we can actually have a conversation about it. So and again, this is really scaring me because these are the things that we're seeing in our society, is that a lot of school boards are putting these, really tight and being very detailed about exactly what they want happening in the classrooms. And I think it's a real disservice to our teachers, and it's sending them a really bad message. And we are already in a teacher crisis. So this is not something that I want to jump on the bandwagon and be a part of for our community and for our district.
I don't think we can't bury our head in the sandbox, and even if we put it in policy that it's not a subject that, that John talked about, they can't bring up, that's going to be brought up whether we put it in a policy or not. If they come up, at least we give the teachers the ability to maybe address and forward to resources and that. But if we just say, no, they can't, well, I don't know if we're doing a service there either.
And I'm not looking to do that either. Maybe I'm focused more on past the policy and more of the processes of when these come up and how it's dealt with. Does that make sense? And because now I'm not trying to negate the comments you said, but I took them directly to me because I had just talked. And as a teacher, I never want teachers to think that I don't believe in them or don't believe they're qualified. As a teacher, if a student came to me with that specific one, I don't feel like it would be my place to send them or provide them resources, and that in that situation, I really believe it would be the counselor's job to do that. And I don't want this policy, my paper sign on it, this policy to make it appear that we're putting that all on the teachers when that's when the counselor's there to support that. So I guess I'm just defending myself because I was worried that I projected that message to teachers.
I think there's probably a level of trust some students have with teachers that may be a better relationship than what they have with parents. And, I do think a teacher needs to refer to a counselor, but I don't see an issue with a teacher who's there with a counselor as a trusting.
Right.
In the situation I gave you the example, they were referred to very strongly. They encouraged them to go talk to mom and dad, and then they did refer them to the counselor for more resources. But that was the first thing they did, was say, yeah, you can be okay talking to mom and dad, but the reality is not every kid really is safe talking to mom and dad about it. So,
well, maybe that's one thing that has we've crossed lines, because when we got presented the last policy, we had plan and policy. So I think we're looking at a combination of those two things. And so maybe that's why just looking, it's kind of hard. We're expecting both of those things here, and this is just a broad policy. And then the plan, I'm sure, has more details, or the way you the way you instruct. If you come across this situation, this is maybe the resources that you would have available to you. That doesn't necessarily.
We've been very clear and was very specific with all of our teachers last year as the year started, that we have our board adopted curriculum and we teach what is our curriculum. We don't have anything we don't teach anything that's not adopted. And so if controversial issues arise, it's usually probably in a social studies class or something like that. If you're talking about the potential civil rights cases that are coming up, then we would talk about it in civil rights. That wouldn't happen. We don't start talking U.S. history until 8th grade. And so, in 7th grade, we're doing Kansas history and geography. 6th grade, you're doing ancient history. So it's not until 8th grade that we would be starting to talk about U.S. history and being able to talk about civil rights, because that's really kind of where the controversial issues lie, because some people believe I should have this right, I should have that right. You talk about rights and responsibilities as a citizen. So grade appropriate wise, it would happen. I believe our teachers are very well trained. We have enough problems getting in all of our time for math and ELA at this time to really dive and direct into another social issue in the elementary would be very hard, because we're pressed for time just to make sure we can get the kids the appropriate instruction in writing and math. I do believe our counselors do a great job of providing those services to the students to help them with issues that they may be going on that happen at home or are happening with themselves as they're going through just growing up. So I do think instructionally, the plan is we have a board adopted curriculum. You guys approved that. We made sure as we went through the curriculum, especially for social studies this year, we had all sorts of statements saying this is not part of the curriculum. We will have controversial issues that will arise, but that'll be more around civil rights issues. And we just give that opportunity to our teachers with professional discretion to talk about both sides of the issue, making sure that happens. It's going to happen around the Second Amendment. It's going to happen around Roe versus Wade. It's going to happen about election law, gerrymandering, all those different things that affect civil rights issues. We've been very strong in teaching our teachers or working with them on providing both sides of the issue and not directing students towards one side. And I believe that's what Glenda's pointing out, that this policy is, we are not pointing students to one side. We're pointing students to all the facts and just facts, not fiction or made up stories that they see.
Well, and I appreciate your explanation of that, because it is the job of our board for us to set a policy. But then we trust the administration and the teachers to interpret that and proceed, have those plans and those procedures so it fits with the policy. And I never want to discourage, like you said, curriculum, it's approved, board approved curriculum, and they teach it. And as a teacher, there are times when topics come up or a learning moment comes up within that where it's not specifically in that curriculum. And I'm not wanting teachers to get the impression that we don't want them to take advantage of those opportunities.
The counselors also have a set
Right.
group of standards that they teach from as well. So
I just
it's
didn't-
all pretty much spelled out.
Yeah, I just didn't want that interpretation to be there, that at least me, I can't speak for everybody else. I don't want teachers to think that we're over their shoulder making sure they're teaching a curriculum word for word, because that's not how teaching works. You know, I think topics come up and discussion goes different directions. So the way you explained it helps me to be more comfortable with this policy. And like you said, when those topics come up, you want students to be able to discuss it and facts to be taught and not opinions or things they read.
Because the social studies standards is primary sources and secondary sources. So they look at what's a primary, what's a secondary, and then they would also look at the standard of choices have consequences. That's number one, Kansas history. So you make this choice, what's the consequence of it? You make this choice, what's the consequence of that? Weigh those using primary and secondary sources. And then kids can form their own opinions based on the data that they have in front of them.
And that's what I hope we encourage. It's unfortunate in our time and day that sometimes opinions, which the student should also be able to express, but then they're told that that's misinformation because the other side doesn't agree with it. So having those sources there and a variety of sources that are factual is important to me. But I think I've gone off the road on the subject.
No, you're
I
good.
just really,
You're good.
I want to be comfortable with it, and I want the rest of the board to be comfortable with it. That's what we go with. Those explanations help me to be more comfortable with the policy. I just want to have confidence that the procedures set underneath them are followed. That's what's best for our students and what's best for what parents are wanting for their kids, because they are our community and also our taxpayers who we represent. So we have a lot on our shoulders, believe it or not.
We got a lot of policies.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable if I go ahead and put this to a vote? A motion to vote?
Yeah, I really hope we don't wait this long again to revisit it, because I think it's one that's going to be at the forefront of topics. So I appreciate that maybe we can get some kind of updates or at the end of the year, how, if we had lots of issues with that or.
Absolutely.
Madam President, I would move that we approve the revised Board of Education policy IKB, controversial issues.
Is there a second?
Awesome.
Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Motion pass. We will move on to another policy, the health screenings policy.
And Michelle is here also to help answer questions if needed.
So again, we didn't get any feedback on this.
No, none.
The feedback probably, or the reason it wasn't on the consent agenda was for me. I had emailed Jennifer and Dr. Dominguez, had a question about the select screenings portion of this. We talked a little bit about it in the last meeting, but in addition to the select screenings, I feel that, by doing the COVID vaccination clinics within the district, we're kind of opening ourselves up to half the people being happy, half of the people being mad. And it's disruptive, or it could be disruptive to just what we're about, and that's education. And so I was just curious if the select screenings portion of this, the way it's read, is where that would fall. That was my question.
We actually plan on bringing our COVID plan back to the board at the next meeting with school starting. That is where that would fall, is under that COVID plan that we have posted on our website. This does not apply to COVID. This just is the regular screenings that the nurses do every single year. It was added to policy at the recommendation of KSB due to legislative action on specifying when the screenings had to happen. So that's the only reason it's in front of you right now. There will be, the COVID plan will be brought to you at the next board meeting. So that will be where the other will be discussed.
And was the vaccine clinics or whatever, was that in our COVID plan specifically?
We do those in conjunction with the health department.
Right, I just didn't
Is what
remember
we
it
do.
being.
So I don't know that it was specifically in our policy, but we can certainly add anything at that time when we bring up the plan.
I was just curious if those didn't fall under this policy, if they weren't in the COVID plan, where it was decided that we were gonna do those clinics. Was that administration that decided that?
It was done as a service to our staff and our families.
So that was decided at the superintendent level or at the?
At the leadership team level, yes. And in several meetings with the health department when they offered and said, we want to do an outreach. Just like the flu clinic, for example, we do the flu clinic every year.
But that one would fall under selected screenings.
No, it doesn't. That is just a
Okay,
screening.
I'm just trying to understand it.
What is an
Vaccines
example
don't
of a
fall under
selected screening?
that. These are just the Kansas statutes and they're just related directly to the screenings that.
Okay.
So it could be just student by student. if you need
So I guess that's when I was trying to figure out where the flu and the COVID, where those clinics, it's just a partnership that.
Right. It's done as a service to our staff and it's one of those deals where they can come if they want to. Most of our staff that do show up say thank you, because I can't get to the health department if I'm staying at school supervising an activity or whatever. And they're very grateful for us to bring the health department to them for those clinics. But that is actually where, the next board meeting is where we can talk about those.
Right, but I think this JGCD is just the vision, the hearing, the dental, and then just, like color blindness and so forth is supposed to fall under the statute component. But yes, on August the 8th, we will do our COVID one and then going back to the same thing. We don't want, you're right. So the last thing does is selected screenings, but that would be a totally different thing. And COVID would not be that. And then go back to the same thing. If someone feels sick, do they get to go to the nurse? In this case, they do at this juncture, and then that would fall under the COVID plan.
The color blindness, scoliosis, we don't do scoliosis anymore. Okay. Asthma,
asthma screening.
Yeah, we do asthma screenings, so
We haven't for the last 2 years, so.
we're talking about health screenings for students.
Anyone else have
That
questions?
answers my questions, Glenda. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John.
Any other discussion, or do we have a motion?
Madam President, I would like to make a motion that we accept the revised board policy, oh no, wrong one, the new Board of Education policy, JGCD on health screenings, that we approve it. Did I say that right? It's been a long Monday.
I heard it
Okay,
that
good.
way. I was second. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Under new business, we have the committee assignments going around. And Colleen, budget planning.
Let me pull up the policies. It's on here. So the first one is the annual operating budget. So a couple of these policies, the updates here are updates from KASB to follow state legislative changes. So some of those impacts have been with the revenue neutral rate, elongating out the kind of budget process. So some of our deadlines have changed from, instead of budgets being due August 20th, now being due September 20th to the state. So updating our policies to align with some of those and the language in it, as well as the updates that we have done in our budgeting process. And then this went through review with legal counsel as well as to align with KASB statutes and policies. So in the red, you can see the edits in language, and then yellows were additional language added to the documents to match KASB.
And this is just our first read on this, so we'll have more time to process it.
Yep. So like I said, here it says like September 15th of each year. Just so that it helps us capture that first meeting in September. So it's late enough and then gives me enough time for budget to approve and then submit to the state on the 20th. And then just the updates of the district budgets, proposal of the budgets. And then Glenda, all this fraud prevention and investigation, that was all from KSB.
No, that was what we had in there before.
Okay.
The yellow was what we had in there prior to in old language, but KSB did not have that language. So we chose to keep that when we talked to
And
Jennifer.
legal counsel said that we should keep that in. Okay. And then the other policy is the budget planning that also goes in. So updating our needs assessment language to match some of the recent updates from legislative action on conducting the needs assessment, and then also adopting. So this year we'll have to do a roll call vote at the budget meeting that the board has reviewed the building needs assessment prior to adopting the budget. So that'll be some language that will be added in this year, as well as an additional report that will be submitted to you.
So basically, they're wanting the campuses site base, and then the principals to have input before they bring it to you guys to view it and then see it and approve it. That this is what we need for our students, for our kids, and for our staff to be successful, and then that way when y'all approve it, you're ensuring that you have heard basically the stakeholders, the teachers, and the admin team's viewpoint of it. So that is not just us up here making that call. So, and that is new, correct?
And so how will that add in the timeline of getting your budget done?
So we are looking at, Jason, remind me, are we looking at the building needs assessment to go to the 25th meeting?
Reporting in, so the buildings have to have it back to us August 5th,
Okay.
and then we should be able to turn it around to that next meeting.
So August 8th, you'll receive a consolidated report that has all of the information from each building that's then submitted to the board for final review before a budget adoption. So then on the 25th, I'll come back to have the permission to publish. So after the initial meeting on the 8th, you'll get the building needs assessment, your budget books, and then the budget presentation. You'll have between the 8th and basically that following week to ask any questions, any modifications. So then on the 25th, when I come back with the permission, the request to publish the budget, and it goes into the newspaper and website, that's the point where no modifications can be done, because once we post that, it'll then go to final approval on the September 12th board meeting, so that I can get it submitted to the state. So there will be a couple of weeks that you'll have between the August meetings to get those questions out.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Yep, no problem. I'm sure I'll come up with some later. Okay. I guess we'll move on to board open discussion. Any volunteers? I can go first. I do have I didn't say much about the committee sign up going through. Do any of our new board members have questions? You served on them a little bit, but you didn't have to sign up just at the beginning, so let me know if you have questions. And summer's going by too fast. I know Dr. Dominguez and his leadership team has been busy listening and learning and also getting things done, so I'm excited for the beginning of the school year. I'm not quite ready for summer to end, but I'm excited for the beginning of the school year. So thank you for all you guys have done this summer when our kids aren't in the classroom. That's really all I have. Now someone has to volunteer. Yeah.
I talked to several staff and teachers that were all part of the recruiting stuff you guys have really been doing. Sounds like they've been working hard, and I think it's been successful. So I thought that was great that came up.
Really exciting to get the numbers for our first, are we gonna call it first annual, I don't know, enrollment days where we kind of consolidated everything at Horse Good. I know that there are some wrinkles to be ironed out, but I think that happens anytime that you put on or try something new. But I mean, the numbers that we got as the board, and when I went through, I must have went in a good time because I got right through. But it was really cool. So I'm hearing great feedback and really appreciate like all the people, the staff. That took a lot of staff that I could see, and it was fun to have the different tables, and so some services there that we could also offer to our families. So that was awesome. Just like Jennifer said, summer's going fast. I will not be here at the next board meeting. I will be out of town, so party with that day. This is a nice short one, so we haven't adjourned yet. And yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. So okay.
I too. I think I'm ready for summer. But I did hear a lot of positive things about the enrollment, specifically be able to get sports physicals there. I heard a lot of people like that, and then some required vaccinations they were able to get there also, and that was just convenient for sports and physical specifically. A lot of people like.
Well, and thank y'all for saying that. Principals and secretaries started today, but their recruitment was huge. But the physicals and some young men and women, there was 2 and 3 per family getting physicals, some 3 and 4 on their vaccinations getting. I mean, so it is good for mom and dad to be able to bring them all in, however many they have, and get it all done. And our density waiting, we're 51% free and reduced already, so that helps us on our financial end. And so we're just plugging away, and that's doing good. But like I say, the principal, secretary, the admin team, the leadership team, the cabinets, everybody pushing really hard to be engaging, enriching, empowering our stakeholders. So it's been very positive. A lot of work that nurse built up through the summer to help us get to the fall and on forward. So it'll be good.
And really the increase on Facebook presence or other social media, I use Facebook, I'm old school, so, but I've noticed like a ton more, almost like, right? It's like 3 or 4 per day. I don't know. Maybe I just can't, what do you call that? Scroll too much? I don't know.
Or troll.
But that's really awesome too, because I think not everybody gets on it all the time. So like the constantness of the messaging has been really good. Books on the bus and the free meals. Yeah. That's been great. So thank you for
We're
that.
definitely working on our branding. So there you go. We're definitely doing that.
You have all the right terms.
John, did you have anything?
No, most of what I was going to say, you guys covered. I thought that the enrollment deal was awesome and a success, and summer school looked like it was a wonderful success as well. So thanks for everybody that participated, all the teachers that worked hard on that, and staff. Outside of that, I'm with you guys. Summer's getting short, and but I'm ready for school and excited for the future.
Thank you. Dr. Dominguez, did you have anything else?
No, I'd like to say summer school was great, and the gains that the students made through the help of the teachers and their parents is, phenomenal. And once again, we just got to keep moving forward. So it's a very exciting time.
Well, then the next board meeting will take place on Monday, August 8th at 6 p.m. in the board meeting room. And have a motion to adjourn.
Madam President, I move we adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Just for you, Glenda.